cryptographic way of verifying that that is authentic with reference to the authority of the DNS data. I think there's probably an argument that says that its time has finally come. The standards and the implementations, it's been a rocky road, but they're now mature and working. There's more and more instances of cache poisoning, Kaminsky attacks. I know that the security researchers are all busy beavering away, trying to find other Kaminsky-like vulnerabilities in the protocol or implementations. And there's lots of TLDs now signed. I mean, .uk is going to do it real soon, but two big ones in the US, .org and .gov, are signed. Various country codes, .se, Sweden, Portugal, Brazil. That's by no means an exhaustive list. Quite pleased with the Portugal one. That happened last week and is using ISC technology, complete with hardware security module to store the keys. So anyway, a little bit more background, DNSSEC. There's a hierarchy of trust anchors. So you follow your path of trust from the root downwards, which means that you're not going to have a fully verifiable chain of authority unless the root itself is signed. And then you can basically go top down, follow the DS records. Lots of heel dragging on that between ICANN and the US government, but finally they agreed at the end of last year that it was going to happen during this year. So the people who publish the zone and essentially are responsible for what's in the zone are IANA as part of ICANN, and VeriSign is the contractor for that. But ultimately it's the US government working with ICANN that have say-so on what gets published. So the whole thing has been very much driven by ICANN and VeriSign working together. They've come up with a plan and timeline, which is available on that website. There are 13 root server instances, which there are 12 operators. And as I said, ISC is involved both because we operate one of these 13 instances froot and because we supply bind software, which we use ourselves and which we supply to several, though by no means all, of the other root operators. So the thing is, you're probably saying, well, I'm an ISP, I'm not really interested in all this DNSSEC stuff, it's not a service that I'm offering. But unfortunately, you can't ignore it. Even if you do not use DNSSEC yourself, signing the root will lead to some changes in the behavior of priming queries to the root servers. In particular, their resource records are going to include signatures, so they're going to be bigger, which means they're going to be bigger than the 512 byte UDP limit. Now, there's an extension to the DNS protocol, eDNS0, which has been around for a few years, which allows up to 4K responses via UDP over IP fragments. And if that fails, there's fallback to TCP, but that can also have some interesting side effects. People who are running DNS software that's been reasonably recently updated, whether it's Bind or Unbound or various other products out there, it's mostly implemented. But the thing to watch out for is that there are an awful lot of boxes out there, high-end firewall boxes just as much as cheap CPE boxes. Ray Bellis at Nominet did a very interesting study of how the cheap-end consumer boxes that are more likely to get thrown out than upgraded behave. And the idea that DNS might be over IP fragments or over TCP is actually a pretty strange concept to a lot of these boxes. So expect some interesting side effects. Can you test whether there's going to be side effects? Yes. ORC, one of my other responsibilities, there is a tool that Dwayne Wessels wrote there which can do this reply size testing. So if you're sitting behind your recursive resolvers and you run that tool, you can figure out whether you've got a clean path for eDNS queries to the root or not. But there's a few months window to sort this out if there are problems, or things will start to go strange where you will start losing visibility of some of the root servers, or there will be fallback to TCP, or there will be other weird behavior when the signed root goes live. I'm going to talk about the DURZ, the deliberately unvalidatable root zone, which is something that's been come up with as a transition tool for this. So there's a timeline for deployment of the signed root. This kind of meshes with the timeline Ian mentioned. On their internal hidden primary, IANA and VeriSign have basically put this in already. And then over the next 6 months, from next week through until the 1st of July, there will be a phase-in of the various root operators who will switch over from the existing hidden authoritative server to the one that contains the DURZ signed root. Now, that can potentially lead to some issues because with DNSSEC, if you have signed data for a zone and then you start to get queries, you start to get answers to queries which are not signed anymore, that is treated as the same as if you got an answer which was invalid and didn't cryptographically validate. So you can see in the situation where you get an answer from subroot servers which are signed and some which aren't, and the ones which aren't signed then get starting treated as though they were invalidly signed, that this can lead to issues. So that's why this DURZ concept has come up with, which is basically that during the transition period, it's going to be signed with a dummy key and zone signing key. If you actually look at the key, it's got text in it which says, this is invalid, do not use. And this is supposed to be something that is encrypted, but it isn't. And the idea there that everything gets treated the same, and that nobody's going to try and use the signed root as though it was valid before it actually goes live. And it won't go live until the 1st of July. So here's the phase-in plan. So you can see that there's basically, it starts with the L root, which is operated by ICANN, because I've got a fair good degree of control over that. And then the ones that are done early are the ones that don't have too many Anycast instances so that they can study the results of changing it over fairly early on. And then it kind of ramps up, and then 12th of April, the bigger ones cut over, and then J is the last one in May. There's then going to be a couple of months where everybody's running the DURZ, but there's various bits of monitoring and analysis going on to decide whether to throw the switch on the 1st of July or not. And when that happens, not only will it be turned on, but the real root zone trust anchor will be published and made available. So what are we doing at FRoot? Well, there's quite a lot of work involved in this. We have more Anycast instances than anybody. We have over 50 of the damn things. All of them run 2 servers. We have 2 in London, one at Lynx, one at LUNAP. We're all set to do the cutover, but actually we're looking for sponsors to help us upgrade these nodes. So if anyone wants to help donate to our public benefit mission and help us upgrade the FRoot instances that we have in London, that would be real helpful. But the interesting thing is that although the timeline basically specifies a week, and actually each operator has been given a window within that week, it's only a 3-hour window. So we've got quite a lot of typing to do in that 3-hour window. Obviously it's fairly automated, but quite a lot of validation to do, so that will be interesting. So the other piece of this puzzle that ISC is responsible for is providing bind as the name server software that we operate on FRoot. We decided that we were going to settle on a particular version of bind that we would use and recommend for this. There are some minor functionality issues there, but it's also just from the point of view of being able to say, this is the version that we will support, this is the version that we're going to run and test and make available for beta testing to the other operators. So bind 962 is pretty much done. We'll be doing, it's testing at the moment. We'll be doing a full release of that probably in a week or two's time. One feature that it has is the SHA-2 encryption algorithm. That is what is being used to sign the root. Actually, the root servers themselves don't need to run that algorithm because all they're doing is dishing up content. But clearly, anyone who's attempting to validate needs to be able to support that algorithm. But we thought it was important to have a clear message about this. And what we're doing is the other root operators who use bind, we're encouraging them to beta test this early. And it's also a good thing that the different root operators don't all run bind, that there is diversity there clearly. The other thing I'll say about bind is that the other release that's just about to hit the streets is 970. Obviously, we're being a little bit conservative with the root, but 970 is important because we have added a lot of DNSSEC functionality to that. And basically, the theme is DNSSEC for humans. In principle, what it means is that if you the default configurations turn DNSSEC on, it should all just work, and you don't have to run a bag on the side of tools or extra stuff. So I'd strongly recommend that you have a look at the beta of that. If you are attempting to do anything within DNSSEC for authoritative servers, validating resolvers, all that kind of stuff, then I would strongly recommend that you have a look at Bind 970. And my colleague Kathy from ISC is here. If you want to ask her any questions about 970, she'll be very happy to do that. So everyone thinks this is a good plan, but the important thing that we've understood about the DNS, particularly some of the things Bradley was saying about configure, is it's very important to gather data off it. This is what ORC does. So ORC is working with the root operators, and basically there will be various bits of data gathering done during the whole transition period so that we can sanity check what's going on and also make sure that things aren't breaking or we aren't seeing any interesting failure modes from some of the things that I talked about. And that's both about long-term trends during the whole transition model, and it's also about taking short-term snapshots whenever a change is made, like another Anycast instance is added. Sorry. Various ways that we're doing this. There's domain statistics collector, which is something that ORC's operated for a long time. Basically, that's every named server gathers statistics about traffic levels, feeds that back to a central presenter. Something new called the long-term query capture. What that's doing is that's specifically capturing data which is used for root cache priming. So when you first hit a root in order to fill your cache up, then this tool is looking at that specifically. And assuming that we can get hardware donated in time, because we're running out of storage space at the moment, there is also DNS cap, which is basically TCP dump specific gathering of all the queries to a root server. Obviously that involves a lot of data, so it's about doing it over a short window of 24 hours during each of the changes. And that's similar to something that we've worked on in the past, the Day in the Life of the Internet project, which is something that ORC does every year, and it just happens that this year it's a lot more interesting. Some of you may be aware of something that ISC operates called DLV, the DNSSEC Look-Aside Validation Service. And this was basically conceived as a transition tool to get around the fact that the root wasn't signed. The root isn't signed, therefore you have potentially islands of trust anchor chains, but they don't all join in the middle. Well, even though the root's signed, there's still islands out there, particularly when important TLDs like COM and NET are not yet signed. So the idea is that DLV basically allows you to reference trust anchor islands through the DLV service. We always kind of said that DLV would be successful if it was a suicide mission. If the need for DLV goes away because everything's signed, that's great. We have found it, and I think a number of the people who use it have found it a very useful test bed for DNSSEC issues. By turning on DLV, they have basically discovered operational issues with deploying DNSSEC that they wouldn't have discovered if they weren't trying to use a central trust anchor authority. So we'll continue to do it, but if the need for it goes away, that'd be great too. So, in summary, that's the ICANN VeriSign site where you can find full plans and documents, and they seem to be doing like monthly updates there. ISC will be working with other root operators to transition FRoot to the DURZ in the middle of April. Colleague of mine will be posting to the blog site. We've got a new blog site, and there'll be some narrative behind this presentation there. We're making Bind 962 available during February to support the root operators, but also as a general release. D-Day is the 1st of July, if everything goes well. And as a sort of final point, if you haven't done any DNSSEC stuff yet, then 970 is a great place to start. And that's it. Happy to take any questions.
Hi, Keith. Ian Meeker from Nominet again. Not a question, just to point out that the Nominet's queries will be available on the ORC DSC pages as well, if anybody has access to them.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do specific ditto capture, then that's a conversation we should probably have. Okay, any other questions?
Dave Reeders on Internet. With what's gone on recently with the disaster in Haiti and the move to sort of keep their top-level domain running. Do you foresee any potential problems with similar efforts in the future when we've got everything signed?
Sorry, do you see any problems with?
What's happened with Haiti? Of course, their route has been knocked offline by the disaster, and so, as I understand it, one of the slaves has now elected themselves as master temporarily to keep that zone alive. Now, obviously, if you are signing zones at the route, if your authoritative entity goes away, do you foresee any implications in trying to do this again?
Yeah, I mean, that basically, by introducing DNSSEC, you're introducing potentially new and interesting failure modes for the DNS as a whole. That's one of the reasons why we thought it was important to have DLV as a playground. But yes, it means, I mean, obviously, until somebody actually puts the TS record in for their TLD, then there's not going to be any impact of that. But clearly, once you put, you sign your zone, your TLD, and you insert a DRES record for that TLD into the route, then that comes with a whole load of responsibility. You know, and that's why I think it's great the operators like Nominet are presenting to the community what their plans are, because you can't do this half-baked. It's something that has to be done significantly. I mean, as a sort of interesting side observation, there's been a study. The other juggernaut that's rolling towards the DNS this year is IDN. And there's been a study done by ICANN on the impacts of IDN, and one of the most potentially operationally risky things about IDN is that it could, if it bloats, sorry, not IDN, IDN's one juggernaut. The other juggernaut is the whole question of additional TLDs that ICANN is bidding for. And one of the possible consequences of that, an ICANN SSEC study showed, is that it could increase the size of the root zone significantly. And one of the places that an increased root zone could have significant adverse effect is those parts of the world where they do not have good connectivity, and you can't just assume that if you've got 10,000 TLDs that you can pull the whole zone data down to your local root server instance anytime soon. So, you know, that has developing country infrastructure issues as well. But yeah, the DNS is becoming a more complicated place, unfortunately, and there are very good reasons for that in the case of DNSSEC. There are certainly good reasons for that in the case of IDN. There are perhaps more controversial reasons for that in the case of additional TLDs. But it's something that we all need to work to try and make work somehow. Okay, if there's no more questions, thank you for that. With apologies for preempting some of what he's going to say, it wasn't intentional, but I think it's again important that we have diversity in the root community and we're all solving the same problems in our own different ways. I'll hand you over to the next speaker, who's Anand Budev from the RIPE NCC, who are the operator of KRoot.